On September 5, 2025, as the first light crept over the horizon, Doha awoke to devastation. The city, usually bustling with anticipation for a new day, was instead gripped by fear and confusion. In the early hours, Israeli fighter jets thundered across the sky, launching a series of coordinated strikes on key sites throughout the Qatari capital. Israel claimed the operation targeted Hamas leadership and Iranian operatives believed to be operating from within Qatar's borders. The world watched in disbelief as explosions erupted across the city, shattering Qatar's carefully cultivated image as a diplomatic hub and a beacon of stability in the Gulf. This was no border skirmish or isolated incident, it was a direct and unprecedented hit deep in the Gulf, sending shockwaves through governments and markets across the globe. Israel justified the attack as an act of preemptive self-defense, citing what it called imminent threats emanating from Qatari soil. Officials insisted the operation was necessary to prevent a larger catastrophe, but the strike upended years of careful Qatari diplomacy, exposing just how fragile the region's stability truly was. Qatar, long seen as a mediator and neutral ground, suddenly found itself at the epicenter of a spiraling crisis. Doha's government, blindsided and reeling, condemned the aggression in the strongest terms. Officials vowed to defend the nation's sovereignty and called for international support as the country mourned its losses. The city's iconic skyline, once a symbol of ambition and prosperity, was now marked by columns of smoke and scenes of chaos. The sense of security that residents once took for granted had vanished in an instant. First responders raced through debris-strewn streets, their sirens echoing through the city as they searched for survivors. Residents, both citizens and expatriates, scrambled for safety, many separated from loved ones in the confusion. The attack was more than just physical destruction, it shattered the very notion of Qatar as a safe, neutral ground. The psychological impact rippled through the population, leaving many to question what the future might hold. Around the world, people held their breath, glued to their screens, knowing that this was only the beginning of a much larger conflict. Israel's gamble ignited a complex web of alliances and rivalries, dragging the Middle East toward the brink of a multi-front war. Regional powers scrambled to respond, each move watched with mounting anxiety. The so-called Circle of Fire had begun, unifying old adversaries and threatening to engulf the entire region in conflict. Protests erupted, borders were fortified, and the world braced for escalation. Hopes for stability and peace vanished in the smoke drifting over Doha, replaced by uncertainty and dread for what might come next. The days ahead would reveal just how fragile and interconnected the region truly was. As families fled, alliances shifted, and the world watched a new chapter of history unfold before its eyes. In the aftermath of a sudden escalation, Qatar found itself thrust into a war it had never anticipated. The tiny Gulf nation, long considered a beacon of stability and prosperity, was now at the center of a rapidly unfolding crisis. Israeli jets roared across the skies, continuing their relentless assault and striking what they claimed were Iranian and Hamas-linked sites within Qatar's borders. The thunder of explosions echoed through the night, shattering any sense of normalcy. Qatar's defenses, though modernized in recent years, were simply no match for Israel's advanced military technology. For ordinary citizens, nowhere in Doha felt truly safe. Shelters filled quickly, and fear spread faster than the news itself. Hamad International Airport, a vital hub for travel and commerce, was forced to shut down. The closure isolated the nation overnight, severing crucial links to the outside world and disrupting global trade routes. Desperate for support, Qatar turned to the United Nations and the United States. But Washington, caught between two key allies, hesitated, leaving Qatar in a diplomatic limbo as the crisis deepened. The Qatari military, built on alliances and joint exercises, was unprepared for a direct confrontation with Israel's formidable forces. The reality of their vulnerability became painfully clear. Economic shockwaves rippled instantly across the globe, energy markets trembled, shipping insurance rates soared, and investors watched in horror as the region's financial stability teetered on the brink. Daily life collapsed almost overnight. Schools closed their doors, playgrounds fell silent, and families huddled indoors, uncertain of what tomorrow would bring. Foreign workers, who make up the backbone of Qatar's economy, scrambled to leave the country. Embassies were overwhelmed as thousands sought a way out, fearing for their safety. Fear gripped the streets of Doha. Once bustling avenues were now deserted, as armed patrols tried to maintain order amid growing panic. The strikes exposed a harsh truth: immense wealth and luxury offered little protection in the face of overwhelming military force. The illusion of security was shattered. Israel's high-tech arsenal, from precision-guided missiles to advanced drones, overwhelmed Qatar's limited defenses at every turn, leaving the nation exposed and vulnerable. The siege of Doha sent shockwaves through the Gulf. Other states watched anxiously, realizing that diplomacy and money alone could not guarantee their security in a region on edge. The illusion of invulnerability was gone. For Qataris, the sense of safety they once took for granted had vanished, replaced by uncertainty and dread. The Gulf's pearl was now under siege, its fate uncertain as the world watched events unfold with bated breath. The conflict quickly spread. Within 2 days, Yemen's Houthi movement entered the war, launching missiles and drones at Israel. Their targets, Eilat and Dimona, key Israeli cities and strategic sites. Israel's Iron Dome and arrow systems intercepted most projectiles, but the sheer volume strained defenses. The Houthis used cheap drones to overwhelm Israel's costly interceptors. A war of attrition. Eilat's port and Ramon airport shut down, disrupting trade and travel. Houthi forces also targeted commercial ships in the Red Sea, threatening global shipping lanes. Insurance rates soared and supply chains rerouted, impacting the world economy. For Yemenis, the war brought more suffering, retaliatory strikes and deepening humanitarian crisis. The Houthis rallied support, but ordinary people paid the price. Yemen's fire, lit in solidarity, burned its own people most. As the south burned, Israel's northern borders erupted. Hezbollah in Lebanon launched rockets and drones, declaring solidarity with its allies. Israeli towns emptied as civilians fled the relentless barrages. In Syria, Iran-backed militias fired on the Golan Heights, prompting Israeli airstrikes on Iranian assets. The skies over Damascus and Aleppo thundered with explosions. Southern Lebanon saw entire neighborhoods flattened. Civilians faced a grim choice: flee or endure. Lebanon's government was powerless, its people trapped in another proxy war. In Syria, renewed conflict deepened suffering and chaos, with civilians caught in the crossfire. Israeli strikes often caused collateral damage, fueling further instability. Extremist groups exploited the chaos, seeking to regroup. The northern arc was ablaze, its people suffering as regional powers clashed. The flames reached Gaza. After the strike on its leadership in Qatar, Hamas declared total war. Rockets rained on Israeli cities. Iron Dome interceptors lit up the sky. Israel responded with overwhelming force. Operation Desert Flame devastated Gaza. Airstrikes targeted militants but also destroyed homes, schools and markets. The humanitarian crisis deepened. Hospitals overwhelmed, infrastructure shattered, civilians trapped. Images of suffering flooded the world, but Gaza's borders remained sealed. Protests erupted in the West Bank, fueling more violence and unrest. The cycle of destruction intensified, extinguishing hope for peace. Gaza's agony echoed across the region, a tragedy with no end in sight. The conflict spilled into Iraq, home to powerful Iran-backed militias. The Popular Mobilization Forces targeted U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria, escalating the fight. American forces responded with airstrikes, drawing the U.S. deeper into the regional conflict. Baghdad faced a political crisis, torn between Washington and Tehran's proxies. The fight against ISIS faltered as attention shifted to the new war. Iraq's fragile recovery unraveled, violence and instability returned. Ordinary Iraqis, weary from decades of conflict, saw their hopes for peace dashed. Iraq was once again a battleground for regional power struggles. At the center of the chaos was Iran, the architect of the axis of resistance. Tehran's strategy empowered proxies from Lebanon to Yemen, challenging Israel and the U.S. without direct confrontation. The Quds Force supplied weapons and direction, turning militias into formidable threats. The Israeli strike on Qatar activated this network, spreading conflict across the region. Iran's goals pressure Israel, undermine U.S. presence, and disrupt normalization with Arab states. But the strategy was risky. Escalation could bring devastating war to Iran itself. The Iranian people, already suffering, had little appetite for more conflict. Iran's power projection was a double-edged sword, threatening to backfire at home. The world responded with urgent diplomacy and condemnation. At the UN, the Security Council was paralyzed by great power divisions. The US backed Israel but urged restraint. Europe called for a ceasefire and decried civilian casualties. Protests erupted in western cities, demanding an end to the violence. Arab states faced public anger and diplomatic dilemmas, torn between alliances and outrage. Saudi Arabia froze normalization talks with Israel as the conflict reignited old wounds. Disruptions in shipping and energy markets threatened global economies. The risk of direct war between Iran, Israel, or the US loomed large. The world watched, fearing the conflict could spiral out of control. As the dust settled, the Middle East stood at a crossroads, its people weary from years of turmoil and uncertainty. The echoes of conflict lingered in the air, a stark reminder of the pain endured by millions. One path led deeper into endless war, where vengeance and proxy battles destroy generations, leaving behind only ruins and sorrow. The scars of violence run deep, threatening to define the future if left unhealed. The other path, narrow and difficult, offered hope through dialogue and diplomacy. It called for courage, patience, and the willingness to listen, even when trust seemed impossible. True security, the region learned, cannot be built on destruction. It must be rooted in justice, understanding, and the rebuilding of shattered communities. The world must act, not just watch, using its influence to broker peace and rebuild shattered lives. Global solidarity and compassion are needed now more than ever. The cost of war was staggering, families broken, children traumatized, futures lost. Each day of conflict deepened the wounds, making healing more urgent and more difficult. Modern weapons proved efficient at destruction, but powerless to heal or rebuild. No amount of firepower can restore what has been lost or mend the hearts of those left behind. The lesson: real strength lies in the wisdom to seek peace, to choose dialogue over division, and hope over hatred. This moment must be a turning point. The cycle of violence must end. The dawn of a new era is possible if the will for peace is stronger than the pull of the past. All voices, especially those who suffered most, must be heard. Their stories are the foundation for reconciliation and lasting change. Addressing root causes, from occupation to regional ambitions, is essential. Only by confronting injustice and inequality can true peace take hold. Peace is a choice, and it must be made now. Every day without it is a day lost for future generations. The future of the Middle East depends on it. The hope for tomorrow rests in the decisions made today, and in the courage to choose peace over conflict.